Okay, Boris. So, based on your experience working with many couples, why is sexual satisfaction so important if you want to maintain a healthy, long term romantic relationship?
Well, we know in terms of emotions, when we are satisfied in our intimate lives, we are more satisfied in our relationship. But also, numerous research shows the same. The more couple are satisfied with their sexual lives, the more they are satisfied with the relationship in general.
What does it do to the psychology of both men and women if they're not getting their sexual needs met in their relationship?
Excellent question. First of all, let's take it on an individual level. Different people need or crave sex for different reasons. For somebody, sex and intimate life in general is more about an emotional aspect. They connect this way. For other people, it's more physically oriented and more physically aroused. For some people, it serves as a safe way of connecting with the partner within the couple because sex makes for an excellent bridge for two people to be in the safe distance and to feel safe and nurtured by one another. So I would maybe rephrase this question to place it less about genders and maybe to place it more about our individualities. Because there are more emotional men who are on the more emotional side, and there are women who are more on the physical side, and vice versa. So I guess that for different people, sex plays a specific role depending on their needs. And we know with each specific couples what sex means for them. And sometimes it's not only one thing. Sometimes it's several things. And these are important things. A lack of them or a loss of them is a crisis in the couple's life.
So, it seems like the main thing is to either satisfy like a physical need or to satisfy this need for that like, emotional connection. Would those be the two main things that pretty much get solved when you engage in sexual activity with your partner? Because like you mentioned, it's not necessarily about gender, right? It's more about the person in terms of what they need on an intrinsic level. So it comes down to physical versus emotion, right?
Yes, and I would also add a communication layer here because it can also serve
Communication.
as a way of communication and
Okay.
serves the communication need.
Can you go a bit deeper on that? When you say in terms
Uh,
of communicating, like what does that really mean?
Like any communication, sex requires two people, at least two people. Let me be a bit humorous. And it's a way of communicating. People communicate through intimate interaction, both physically, emotionally. They communicate. Yes, I already mentioned physically. I'm trying to think up about other things, how they communicate. But these are two main bridges how people communicate with one another by means of sex. Oh, and also if you add the orgasm to it, this sexual communication, it has something that not every communication has. It has this climax of we've managed to reach something, to come to some conclusion which is satisfactory to us both. Many couples subconsciously employ sex as this successful stencil of communication in which they satisfy one another.
So I guess once again, it comes down to the actual person, right? And like what you're trying to tell the person. That can obviously go into multiple different things because some people only feel loved if their partner is willing to have sex with them, right? If you're not willing to have sex with them, like you can tell them that you love them, but that form of communication is not actually being expressed because they're not getting intimate. And so I guess that's
Yes.
one form, but it can go into many different things. So one thing that you mentioned in your blog post is that it's really important to have a compatible like libido with your partner if you want to maintain a long-term healthy romantic relationship. What does that mean? Can you go a bit deeper on that? Like how do you actually figure out what your libido is and how do you know if your partner has like a compatible libido?
Yes. So you can basically divide libido into three stages: the stage of arousal, the stage of the act itself, and the stage of orgasm. If you and your partner are compatible in all three, how do you say, in all three stages of in all three components, and if you are incompatible somewhere, it will show, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible to fix. So again, I would say that the best fit is when couples coincide and match in these three dimensions.
Okay, orgasm, act, and having arousal, right?
And arousal, yes.
Arousal. Yeah. Okay, so can we go like a bit deeper on each one and then gain more clarity on what each aspect means?
Yes, of course. I don't think I will be able to tell it as a lecture,
No
but we
problem.
can
No problem. I
discuss
know.
it.
I know. Yeah, yeah. No worries. No
Yeah,
worries at all. Yeah. So we can start with the arousal, then to the act, and then to the
yes.
orgasm.
What does arousal include? It includes us being relaxed, wanting our partner, being open to the act itself, and generally being aroused by our partner. So, for different people, the length of arousal can vary. Some people get aroused immediately, and in this case, gender does play a role because men tend to
Yeah.
get aroused much more faster and easily and without too much stimuli.
Mhm.
Whereas women might require more time, more preparation, more relaxation, more safety involved in it. When I mention compatibility in the arousal stage, it doesn't mean that the couple has to get aroused in the same way. It's totally okay if we understand and respect each other's needs and we can satisfy them. That also means the couple is compatible on the stage of arousal. And of course, the stage of arousal, like a sexual act in itself, it's supposed to bring pleasure. If we are talking about it in a casual way, yes, it's something that enriches a couple's life. So you cannot skip this stage and get pleasure from other stages. It's a very important stage. So again, the compatibility here transpires from the two people being able to enjoy themselves also at the stage of arousal. And again, for that, we need to know what excites our partner.
So it seems having a good understanding of what gets your partner aroused and also how long it takes, right? Because obviously for women, it takes a bit longer, more like foreplay needed and more of a connection. For guys, it's like within 5 minutes, it's like right away, right? So just having a good understanding of that dynamic makes it easier for people to understand each other.
Yes, we know that the whole porn industry mostly
Yeah,
panders to men because it's something very fast,
it
right? You
is.
can go on any side and for some people, and if we are talking about women, for many women, arousal might start at a much earlier stage, at a totally pre-sexual stage. For example, a person might need a date. A person might need an attention, an undivided attention before actually getting to the sexual part. And all that plays a very important part in the arousal. It's especially prevalent in women, more so than in men. If the man, a specific man, understands that his partner, if we're talking about women here, gets aroused in this way, that she needs an attention, she needs to feel that she is being nourished and respected emotionally, and maybe he brings her some flowers. All that plays a very important role in arousal for some women, and lucky are those guys who understand it and are able to follow these unspoken rules.
Definitely.
For some people, the arousal starts from the clean sink. If there are no dishes to
Really.
wash and no laundry to do, and the floor is clean, and the children, for those who have them, are fed and have gone to sleep, for them, it might play a very important role in the arousal stage.
Huh. So there has to be a lot of communication to really understand this, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go on to the act of sex when it comes down to having a compatible libido. Can you go a bit deeper on that?
Yes, when the two people do to one another what they like and they enjoy themselves in the process. Again, here it doesn't mean that the two persons have to be born with the understanding, with the innate understanding on what has to be done during the sexual intercourse. It's totally okay to communicate these needs and to learn them as the relationship progresses. Therefore, for many couple, sex life improves as it matures, as the relationship advances, and so they learn about one another, they understand one another better, and so they can satisfy one another better during sex itself.
For this part, it's more about the style of sex, right? Or like how you like to take part in sexual activity, like certain things that you like within the act. And then that you will find out as you do engage in it, right? It's hard to just sit there and try to imagine it. You can try, but most of the time, like you will figure it out as time goes on.
Sure. In addition to that, some people explore their sexual preferences during sex itself or during the relationship with a specific person. It's not like they come with a manual on what has to be done for them to enjoy sex. It's totally okay to discover oneself during the length of the relationship, and with different partners, it might also come differently. We learn different things about ourselves.
And then we talk about the orgasm, right? So, what does that mean in terms of having a compatible libido?
That's a great question to which I don't have an immediate answer.
Hmm.
But again, let's fantasize. Since we are in the field of sex, let's
Yeah,
fantasize about this subject.
no problem.
Of course, not any sexual act has to end with an orgasm for either women or for men. Again, it's a preference. And many people, they practice sexual life without necessarily reaching orgasm. And you have different spiritual practices in which not reaching orgasm is the highest point of sex, namely not reaching orgasm. But let's say if two partners are capable of experiencing orgasm, and nothing stops them from that, which means that they can relax, they can open up to one another, and they enjoy the whole sexual act, so they are able to finish. And with the orgasm, I would say that it means this signifies this compatibility on the orgasmic level. Not all people are capable of experiencing orgasm, and some people totally adapt to it and totally adapt their sex life so that they get satisfaction without actually experiencing orgasm. Because again, sexuality is
Yeah.
a complex thing. It's about emotions, it's about biology, it's about compatibility, it's about communication, and so on. So I think that the two most important stages of sexual compatibility is the stage of arousal and what comes before it and during it, and the stage of actually having a good quality intimate sexual act during which two people are satisfied.
Okay, now how would you know if this person that you think that you're going to engage in a long-term romantic relationship with, how do you know if your libido is compatible? Is it just through talking and asking questions, or do you actually have to engage in that kind of sexual activity for a while to really understand? How would you actually know? Because sometimes you can ask the question, but then they might lie. You know what I mean? So how do you actually know that?
You don't know that until you try. And even if it looks
Yeah.
very promising, even if both of you have high expectations and you want it so much, you don't know how it will come out at the end. Without actually trying, you will not know it. But I also want to say that many people do not place special interest in sexuality in their relationships. It plays a role, but not the most significant role.
Yeah.
And for this category of people, even if sex isn't great, their relationship still can be great. But on the other end, there are people who place a lot of weight on the subject of sexuality. So, of course, for such people, sexual compatibility will play an extremely important part in a relationship. But I don't think that it plays the most important part. Because if people are able to communicate, if people have a good personal relationship, if they have a good friendship, if they respect one another, you can improve sex, even if it's not great initially.
So that's great. That's a good overview on trying to figure out if you and your partner have compatible libidos. But let's just talk about some problems and solutions that we can engage in to really overcome some problems. So you mentioned that there are problems within the relationship and problems that are outside of your relationship that can lead to a sexless relationship. So let's just start with problems that are outside of your relationship and then we can go from there. So one of the problems you mentioned is physical health issues, right? So what are the most common types of physical health issues that tend to lead to a lack of intimacy? And again, how can people overcome it?
So it can be different illnesses and physical conditions in which people are unable to engage in sexual activity. There are some medications with the side effect of not being able either to get aroused or to maintain a good arousal during a sexual act. And also, the age plays an important role in it because our bodies change with time. So it's predictable that our libidos might also go down and our sexual lives might change. Also, another factor which I would add here is again, but it has to do with age and hormonal issues. for women and for men at a specific age, the libido can go down. So these are the physical factors.
Around what age does your libido tend to go down? And is it the same for men and women, or is it different in terms of age?
It's different generally from person to person. And now we live longer. So the active sexual age also grows as we become younger for a longer period of time. Very roughly, you would look at the age of 45 to 50, very roughly, to start looking at these things, both at men and women, but it depends on a specific person.
Okay. And then when it comes to the hormonal issues, right? What type of hormonal issues affect your ability to engage in sexual activity the most?
Since I'm not from a medical field,
Got
I'm
it,
from
yeah.
a consulting field.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm less an expert in naming which hormones it would be and how they influence us and
Got it.
prioritizing them.
For that one, I guess you should just probably work with your family physician and they can refer you to a
You have to
specialist and go from there.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for this comment. You need to
Yeah,
approach your
definitely.
physician and to talk
Definitely.
about your health. That there are different kinds of hormone therapy, and also stresses influences our hormones, which also influence our sex lives. So definitely anything which has to do with the physical aspect and the health, go to your physician and talk to them.
The other thing you mentioned is perceived lower quality of life. So, how does this get in the way of your intimacy? And again, how can people turn this around?
Let's say if a person doesn't have enough financial resources and they are preoccupied where to obtain money, definitely impacts how free they feel to engage in a sexual activity. They just don't have the energy for it. So if you live a life where you find yourself fighting for your survival and fighting to meet your basic needs, the quality of your sexual life will probably suffer. And the solution, I would say, not to be too hard on yourself, not to demand from yourself to be performer in bed. And you need to address your situation, life situation with empathy, and the cycles of life change and the circumstances change. And once you got out of these difficulties, your sex life will probably follow and it will improve. So don't try to be the performer.
So, pretty much when your quality of life seems to be lower than it normally is, you tend to feel more trapped, right? So, you don't feel as free as you once did. That's when things start to really get in the way of your ability to be intimate, right? So, I guess that's the main idea. If you're not feeling free, that's a huge problem.
Yes, exactly that. In addition to that, when people are dissatisfied with their quality of life, they try to improve it by means of sexual life. And when they aren't able to perform there, it brings them even more down. It dejects them more. Yeah, you need to treat yourself respectfully in such case and treat your difficulties respectfully and not try to fix it with sex because it wouldn't help.
So it seems like the main solutions are obviously change the way that you view the situation. Don't be too hard on yourself and just allow yourself to feel more free, right? Which will eventually help you with the area of sex as well. And then obviously at the same time, make the certain changes in your life that you have to make. If you have to learn certain
Yes,
skills to move up, to acquire more
yes,
wealth and stuff like that.
exactly.
But that's a whole nother conversation. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really interesting though, because like most people, they tend to get a bit confused as to why they're not as sexual, but it's because they're too neurotic and they're not as free. So that's really important. Now, one thing that spins off that is mental health issues, right? So this is obviously really challenging because it's such a broad topic in terms of mental health. But with your practice, what have you noticed in terms of working with many couples? Like, what are the most common types of mental health issues that tend to lead to a sexless relationship?
Depression has become more prevalent because people deal with ever so growing challenges now than they have had dealt before. So many people become stressed, overwhelmed, depressed, and they just don't feel this zest in life and for life. So I think I would mention depression as a factor impacting sex life. I would also mention anxiety. Again, since we are subjected to many stimuli all around us, and we need to react simultaneously to fight on several fronts and to work and to be successful and to learn and to have relationships and to perform in bed, There's so much pressure on us. There are people who are anxious by their nature, and I'm one of them, by the way. And yeah, so this anxiety, it might make it difficult to be a perfect sexual partner. So again, the advice here would be not to demand of yourself too much, because anxious people, they try to be successful on many fronts. They also tend to be perfectionists, and
Yeah.
so they try to be good everywhere. My advice would be not to try too hard and just to let yourself some rest. And when you are dealing with a challenging mental situation, you need inner resources to deal with it. You need your resources to deal with depression. You need your resources to deal with anxiety. You need your resources to deal with stress. So allow yourself to have this energy to help yourself, first of all. And magically, once you are able to do that, again, your sexual life follows, it improves.
Okay, yeah. So it seems, as you mentioned, like in the previous one, obviously don't demand too much on yourself. Be okay with not being perfect, right? If you make mistakes, don't be too hard on yourself and just put unnecessary load on your head, right? And then the other
Yeah.
one, obviously, since mental health and having anxiety and depression, it's going to be specified to the person, right? So again, go to the right people and like resources that can help you figure out the real solutions to your own problems that you're dealing with, right? So finding
Yeah. So
resources and don't be too hard on yourself.
Yes, also when a person dealing with depression or
Mm.
anxiety or any mental symptom and they involve their partner in it and they ask for help and they share their progress, the partner feels involved, and this space, this relationship space opens up. And again, magically, it also improves sex life because again, it's not about being perfect. It's about being able to share this common space, to share what's personal, to have this emotional communication, to share the progress or the lack of progress. And then again, it's the word intimacy wasn't called so for nothing, because
Yeah.
intimacy, it increases intimacy, improves it. It also improves sexual intimacy, because sexual intimacy is a part of the general intimacy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like a form of bonding, which again brings you closer, which makes obviously having sex
Exactly.
a lot more fulfilling. Now, speaking of coming closer together, let's talk about problems like within your relationship. So, one thing you mentioned is body image. And that pretty much comes down to the importance of you and your partner finding each other sexually attractive enough to have sex. So, can you go a bit deeper on that? And also, how do you talk about this with your partner without offending them?
That's a great question. How do I
Yeah.
approach it? Okay, this question has two sides.
Mm.
The first side is when the person is dissatisfied with their body and they come to you and they say, I'm old, I'm ugly, I'm fat. And the best reaction to it is not to react, not to convince them or otherwise, not to try to jump out of your skin and to tell them that it's really enough that you are actually able to tolerate that they think that about themselves. And if you continue to love them and to have physical contact, non sexual physical contact, like hugging them and kissing them, and maintain verbal contact to talk to them and to spend time together, it can be a phase that will just pass, because sometimes people turn against themselves. And if they see that their partner is okay with that, with them turning again themselves without making a big deal out of it, and the partner continues to love them, they eventually also continue to love themselves. So this is the first aspect. The second
Mm.
aspect is when you've changed or your partner has changed and you don't like how they look like. And that's a whole conversation because it also has different layers in it. Did they change so much that you've lost all sexual drive towards them? Or have they changed slightly? For example, due to some external circumstances. For example, when a woman has a birth, naturally her body changes. Or when people have some stress in their life and they're unable to eat properly, also their physique changes. So the question is, to which extent did it change? If it has changed slightly, when you then you as a couple can address the issue together. How can you help your partner eating more healthy? How can you help them address this stress? How can you help your wife overcome the period that comes after the childbirth and so on? But if something has changed so drastically that you feel repulsion toward this person and you feel the need to attack them and to tell them to change and to go to do sports and to again to change and you do not accept them, this is probably the indication that we are in the mental realm, that maybe this
Mm.
person has become depressed and we haven't noticed it. And so their weight gain or the change in how they look in their looks comes from that. And so it brings us again to the subject of mental health. And we need to address this issue through mental health professional. So I would look at these things like that. Again, also people's physique can change due to an illness. And again, can we support our partners during this illness? Can we tolerate it? Can we tolerate this temporary period? So this is basically my answer to this question about the body image.
Now, you mentioned that the first part is when the person themselves is not happy with their body and then they're like, oh, I'm fat, I'm ugly, and then I'm too short, or whatever it is. And then you mentioned that it's best to not react and to not try and convince them, oh, no, you're not fat. Why is it not helpful to do that?
I just want to add one thing. People can get mentally distraught and it can lead to different nutritional issues and the illnesses that come with them. So if you really see that the person is ill, but then again, here we are in the realm of physical illness. We are not in the realm of communication and psychology. But if you see that your partner is developing either a mental or a physical illness, then not their body image has to be addressed. This illness has to be addressed. Okay, so we need to mention this case. In other cases, some people might want the kind of attention from us which they have gotten from their childhood. And often it's a negative attention. Some people get used to drawing attention and love, figuratively speaking, but it can be considered a kind of love. They draw attention to themselves by other criticizing themselves or by doing something negative. And so once we reinforce this pattern, they also learn that we do the same, that we pay attention to their negative sides. And this process often happens completely subconsciously. They don't even pay attention to that. And so once they can try us, how do we react to that? So if they start to complain about their body and you really don't see an issue, right? If your partner has gained some minimal weight, which they really dramatize, I think it would be good to provide positive attention to them, to how they look now and without arguing with them. Yeah, I don't know if if it makes a good answer. I
No, it
also
is.
don't, yeah, I don't speak here as an expert who tells exactly what should be done. I'm giving just a point of view from my vantage point as I see things, when I speak to people and as I observe things. So I would like the people who are listening to us just to address it in a very specific and subjective way as I am providing and offering it here.
That's really important though, because like many people don't really see it like that, right? Because to be honest, like sometimes being overly positive can actually work against the person, right? Because as you mentioned, this like reaction of, oh, I'm so ugly, I'm fat, it comes from a much more different place than just your body. And then as you mentioned, like maybe when they were younger, they got a lot of attention and validation from seeking that by being negative. And that was their only way of getting people to see them. So when you reinforce them again, then they learn, oh, okay, I just have to be negative to get this person to see me. And then the other problem is obviously being mentally distraught. There's something else that's going on that's leading to this reaction. And then being more like empathetical with your approach and trying to really see what's going on, that tends to be much more effective instead of just saying, oh, no, you're so beautiful, all this stuff. Oftentimes it just goes over people's head, right?
Yeah. You see, also sometimes people complain about one thing, but they imply a totally different thing. Your partner might complain about their body, but maybe they really mean that you don't pay enough attention to them. Or maybe they mean that you didn't listen to them when they said something important and you just ignored them and didn't realize how important it was for them to be acknowledged and heard. So they draw this dissatisfaction and complain about another subject, which you will definitely listen now, especially if it will influence your sexual life. Okay, you didn't listen to me. I told you that I failed the job interview and you didn't listen to me, didn't sit with me. I didn't need much. I just needed you to listen and you didn't give me this attention. Now I will complain about some body part of mine, and I will also let you know, but that since I feel ugly, I don't feel like having sex with you. And now you will get it. You will not get this, what it connects us to, but now I've got my attention and now I feel that I've made my point.
So it seems like the real main thing here is to make sure that you don't reinforce any habits that can make it a lot harder for you to actually talk about the real problem. So obviously when it comes down to this specific topic of body image, you probably have to talk about it prior to getting sexual, right? And just say, hey, if we're going to really go down this path, we have to understand what our needs are and then just make that clear so that both people are on the same page and you don't just let certain things slide and then 20 years later you try to have a conversation, but it goes nowhere because you've built such a habit to a point where it's really hard to reverse. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, on the one hand, I totally agree. On the other hand, you cannot predict many things. Some things you just you encounter them later, and you say
Humans change, right?
inshallah.
Humans change. Yeah. We're really like unpredictable.
Yeah, Shak. I think that in a relationship, when we provide our partners with enough positive attention, and we compliment them, and we mean it, we compliment
Yeah.
their body. We compliment little things about them that we appreciate. It really helps prevent this negative self-image, and it overall increases libido within the couple.
So that pretty much goes on to the next point, which is you talk about it as forgetting about communication. And you say something along the lines of sexual responses generally come from non-sexual affection, right? So can you go deeper on what you mean by non-sexual affection and what about that makes it a lot easier for people to be more comfortable being sexual?
Can I ask you to quote a specific sentence so I understand the context and can expand on it?
Yeah, sure. The erotic responses come from non-sexual affection. That's what you in the blog post under that
Oh,
one
okay,
area. Yeah.
okay.
I
Yeah,
have the sentence here,
okay, yes.
luckily. Yeah,
Yes, thank you for this question.
no
That's an
problem.
interesting thing which will probably lead us to the depths of psychoanalysis, but I will not go there.
Hmm.
Erotization or sexualization is a form of psychological defense with which we subconsciously protect ourselves from anxiety. So let's say we are having a conversation with someone we really like and we want to know more about them and we want to have meaningful conversation and we are not in a rush to have sex at all, but something within us just pushes us to make this contact sexual, to get closer to them, to devour them with our passion and to intensify this passion and to have sex with them. It's a form of psychological defense because some of us, when we are developing a connection and we are developing a dialogue and a relationship, it makes us anxious. Why? Because what if this person is the one? What if, as the conversation progresses, we will feel more comfortable with them? We will like them more. It will appear to us that we have the same values. And then it will not come, it will not pan out. They will not like us as much, for example. It's a failure that raises a lot of anxiety. So some people subconsciously just sexualize the contact to prevent it because here now we've become closer and now let's talk. And it's not always the great strategy. Now,
Got it.
in addition to that, many people, and it's especially correct regarding men, they also try to deal with anxiety by means of sex. Okay, honey, I had a bad day at work. Let's have sex. I will not tell you I had a bad day at work, but I will tell you that you reject me and I want you and let's have sex and our sexual life hasn't been great.
Yeah, it's not.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also a form of sexualization, and it's a psychological defense which we employ to protect ourselves from anxiety. Because were we not to employ it in this case, we would have to deal with anxiety transpiring from work, and we would have to say, honey, bad things happening at work. I don't know what to do. I'm unsure about my future. What will happen next? What sex are we talking about? Let's talk about it. Maybe we can find some common points. And that's why the relationships are ruined sometimes, because people very fast to sexualize things and to go to bed instead of having deep conversations and dealing with these deeper feelings of anxiety, sadness, anger, shame, guilt, and so on.
Yeah. So pretty much being able to open up and being able to really connect with your partner is like a form of non-sexual affection, which leads to a healthy erotic response, which is what we're looking for, right? Now, is there any other form of non-sexual affection that you would recommend that people can really start to look into if they want to go down this path and just figure out ways to make their sex life more healthier?
Yes, non-sexual physical contact, hugging, kissing, holding hands, petting one another, passing by one another and touching one another. This is a great form to develop physical intimacy. And this is like I wouldn't call it the preliminary stage of sexual intimacy, because it will not necessarily grow into sex, but it brings satisfaction in itself, and it helps the couple to stay in touch, to physically stay in touch, and also to feel wanted. Because if the person touches us, it's probably pleasant to them, it pleases them, and it also pleases us. So we get our endorphins, and we enjoy it, both to touch and to get touched and to be hugged.
Absolutely.
So this is probably the main advice I would give. And another advice, non-sexual advice, would be to talk about emotions, which many people and many couples unfortunately don't do
Yeah.
because they don't know how. And sometimes the emotional intensity is too high to handle. And that's why they actually go to therapy or to counseling, to have somebody else by them to share these emotions and to do it safely. But if you are able, you as a couple, able to develop this ability to tolerate each other's emotions without judging them, without judging your partner, without giving advice on what to do if the person is angry, how to mend his or her life, or how to rectify their ways. It gives a tremendous value to the relationship and to sexual life as a part of this relationship. And if we take our previous example of the partner complaining about their body, what is the emotion that accompanies it? Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it fear? We can talk about this emotion without talking about the body image. What are they really scared about? Who or what are they angry at? And so on. And this is actually what we do during sessions, but we take the underlying emotion and we look at it, what it conveys, what it hides, because people convey emotions in different ways, but what the emotion really hides, this is what's important to understand.
Yeah. And then that pretty much leads on to the final point here, unfortunately, as our clock ticks down, which is having conflicts from the past, which you haven't solved yet, right? It just builds up into a lot of anger and a whole bunch of resentment towards the other person, which obviously just completely kills the intimacy. So you mentioned that ways to talk about this are to go to counseling, don't give advice on how that person should feel and stuff like that. But is there any other strategies that you'd recommend for people to really use if they want to talk about certain problems that are really uncomfortable, but they just haven't spoken about it yet? Because as you mentioned, they don't know how to talk about it. What are different strategies that they can use?
Are you talking about sexual problems or problems in general?
Problems in general, but to be honest, it's more like non-sexual, right? Because having problems that are non-sexual tends to kill the whole sexual aspect anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah, this one is more about like non-sexual problems. Yeah.
Okay. So sex serves an important role in talking about non-sexual subjects because it can become an instrument for retribution. For example, when a couple argues and one withholds sex from another, as a form of punishment.
Yeah.
They are making their point. And it happens because they couldn't agree in the non-sexual discussion. So the sexual argument of withholding sex becomes this decisive argument. See, you understand now? Okay, that's my point.
It's like
Now,
revenge.
it's a revenge. It also works vice versa. One can withhold sex, but another person, another partner might demand sex. We are married. It's my right. You have to give it to me. It's something I don't care if we had an argument. It's my right. It's your obligation and so on. So it also becomes a weapon of retribution. And it also becomes a weapon of revenge. Why? Because they haven't been able to have a civil discussion in about non-sexual subjects and the emotions that accompany them. So sex becomes this decisive argument about which they argue. This competition unravels, and this muscle game, this game of force starts, and they play it together. And of course, it doesn't improve their sexual life a bit, and it moreover deepens their conflict, their non-sexual conflict, because now they have another problem to handle. It's really an important skill to communicate about non-sexual issues, but it's also it's a non-obvious and a hard skill. It's not something that we are taught at school.
Yeah.
And people have different communication strategies. People have different approaches to emotions. People have different fears about having embarrassing or uncomfortable conversations. So we need to take all that into account. That's why my job is so hard, but also so interesting to see different people and help them. And I see that they really do need this help because many people are unable to do it by themselves. And I want to say that there is no shame in it because a couple's communication is a state of art. It has so many nuances and it's so versatile and it's so non-obvious. It might raise so many emotions coming from early childhood, sometimes from a pre-verbal stage when we are unable to utter them and to talk about them.
Complicated.
Yeah, it's totally complicated, but it's also very rewarding when the couple learns how to talk about emotions, how to talk about unpleasant things without sexualizing them, without trying to fix one another, without judging one another, and just being able to tolerate the emotions of one another.
Okay, yeah. So it seems like the only way to really overcome that, if it's reached like this high point, is to, first of all, you both have to be okay with each other's emotions. And it seems like to get help from a healthy outside source, right? Which oftentimes comes in the form of a specialist, or you could even do, I guess, some self education yourself or with each other, reading certain books and so on. And then it seems like that's the only way to make real progress, right? If you want to make real change.
In many cases, books wouldn't be helpful because in couples communication, there are so many emotions that you need a live person nearby to be able to, just to look at these emotions and to have a neutral outlook at your couple. So let's say if we are talking about some work skill or some cognitive skill, when a person needs to acquire, then books are helpful and courses are helpful.
Yeah.
But when we are talking about emotional conversation and communication, it's very hard to get help solely from books or from learning material or from ChatGPT. You need someone live by you to connect with you, to be there and to be included in this emotional space.
Okay, Boris, thank you so much for this great episode. It's a lot of content we covered in 1 hour. But if people want to look more into your work, really see what you do, where can they find you?
Feel free to visit my website and feel free to contact me.
Your name is pretty, unique as well. Because if you type it on Google, it's just you that shows up, right? So, we'll put all your stuff in our video description below and people can go and check it out if need be.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Shaq. It was a pleasure.
No problem, Boris. Thank you so much. Hey, this is great.